The story about the feeding of the multitude is the only miracle story of Jesus that's told in all four Gospels. As scholars point out, this indicates the early church found this story to be of particular importance. Now, modern scholars do not agree on why it was important. Did they connect it with communion? Was it the sheer numbers involved? Was it the fact that Jesus sends out the disciples with the bread and the fish instead of doing it all by himself? Was it because it reminded the early Christians of the manna in the wilderness? Was it because everyone likes a party? Mark and Matthew have two stories each about a feeding of the multitude. In one it happens on Israelite soil, and the other it happens on Gentile soil. Something that may have been a significant detail in a church that was rapidly becoming more Gentile than Israelite in nature. Another difference that I noticed in the Matthew and Mark sets of stories is that in the first one, the disciples come and want Jesus to send the people away because it's getting late and they need food. In the second story, both Matthew and Mark say Jesus grew concerned about the people possibly fainting or becoming ill from lack of food, and so he initiates the feeding. A lot could be made of those details. Well, I can't say what was in the minds of Matthew and Mark, but in relaying those stories, they are telling something about the progress of the church that came to understand the Gentile world was spiritually hungry, and the Christians decided to feed them. The story in John, however, includes a charming detail. In the other Gospels, we are not told where the bread and the fish come from, only awareness that these are pathetically inadequate to feed so many people. In John, it's a boy who offers his own meal to share. That may be what leads some scholars to believe the feeding of the multitude is not a miracle of multiplication as much as a miracle of generosity. In other words, when people saw that the boy had been generous in sharing his lunch, they decided to share their own hoard of food. Together, they proved to have even more than they needed. Only John includes the story of the crowd following Jesus across the water. Jesus told them, "You only came because of the bread." It's very human to want the easy answers. There's a lot of hard stuff in life. Getting up every morning and working, even a job that you like, isn't always enjoyable. What are the traditional ideas of heaven? People picture pearly gates and golden streets, mansions, and sitting around playing musical instruments or loafing in Elysian fields. In other words, the traditional idea of heaven is of a rich person's indolence in wealthy surroundings. Personally, I would not mind that as an occasional vacation, but a life without meaning or purpose or productivity seems unbearably boring to me. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like some things easy. I like dishwashers and running water and electricity and computers. I'm not sure I'd have ever written my first book if I'd had to pound it out on my old manual typewriter. I'd like inexpensive, fast, and safe solutions to weight loss, getting to the beach, or getting across country. Some of those might be okay, but at times the easy solution is not always the best one. When I was in graduate school, I often had 3 jobs and picked up temporary work whenever I could to supplement the financial aid that I had. I knew another student who had tons of grants and scholarships. She didn't need a job. One day, the student mentioned she needed money for something she wanted, so I told her about my temporary work and how they paid well and could use someone else. "No," she said, "I think I'll write and ask my church to send me some money." Well, I was struck by a couple of things. One was astonishment that her local church had extra money to send to a student. The second was a profound gratitude. I don't know how she will look back on her seminary years, but I knew mine would mean a great deal to me because I had to throw everything into them. I had to work for what I had. I valued it that much. Now, many people will testify to something similar. A win means so much more when you've had to work for it and genuinely merit the gold medal or the blue ribbon. There are personalities that don't care. They just want the worldly award, whether or not they deserve it. I can't speak to their approach to life. It's too foreign to me. Jesus has never been the way of ease and lack of effort. Being truly a Christian very often means taking the hard path. There are Christians today who do talk as if you just have to believe the right way or pray the right words and automatically get what you want. Maybe that's not what they mean. I see a lot of people in the world who understand that to be what they're saying. And they reject it as false advertising and almost as an elaborate con job. Would Jesus ask, have you only come for your fill of the loaves? The universe operates on certain principles, and one of them seems to be that when we invest ourselves, when we truly work for something we value, we get more out of it. And getting what we want too easily may be the very worst thing for us. Now, I'm not talking about healing our loved ones or things like that. I have some ongoing conversations with God about those subjects. Getting things too easily, certain things, is another story. The bread, the easy life, various goals. How often have I read about people who achieve great things early with minimal effort, and then they cannot handle it afterwards? The people Jesus was talking to that day had come a long way, and they'd worked really hard to get there. What did they want? They didn't want to learn something meaningful from Jesus. They wanted bread. They wanted an easy miracle. Imagine having the flesh and blood Jesus standing in front of you and only asking for a tuna fish sandwich. They were going to put that kind of work into it. Why ask for bread that can get moldy? Why not ask the bread of life? Jesus made it clear that God has a deep compassion for our genuine human physical needs, and he never suggested we should starve to death to prove that we're creatures of spirit rather than of flesh. That's not what he was saying. He also wasn't saying that we shouldn't care about the hungry. We should care about the hungry. We should do everything we can to feed the hungry. There's a story my dad told about an annual conference years ago. At that time, he was in the Southern California conference when they held it down at Long Beach. Said the speakers really struggled. The people weren't paying attention. He was a good speaker. The subject was important, but it was probably an afternoon at conference, and people simply weren't paying attention. After forging on for a while, the speaker stopped talking. He took a silver dollar out of his pocket. He went to the altar where he tossed it loudly into the offering plate with a big clang. As he did this, every person in the room suddenly focused on him in rapt attention. He came back to the lectern and said, "Well, I guess you pay attention to the things that matter most to you." Wow. Now, that may or may not have been fair of the speaker on a tired annual conference afternoon, but it still makes a point. We need to pay serious attention to the things that truly mean something, the eternal, meaningful matters of life. We do need bread for our needs today. We need the bread of life for today and for all of our tomorrows. Amen.